Seeking the wise.
With Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy.
Covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wise podcast. I am so grateful for you to be joining us today. I am Aaron Keith. I am a co-host of the Wise podcast, and this is going to be my review and reflection back on episode 19, in which we discussed and was titled, "What is Unconditional Love and the Process of Reaching It?" Of course, this subject is one that is talked about a lot within the spiritual communities. Unconditional love, what is it? I want to reach it. Can I live in unconditional love? And, in this episode, we definitely got into what would be unconditional love and then got into what you would actually have to do to essentially reach our definition of what unconditional love is. Now, this episode is episode 19, so it was way back when we first started doing it, and this would have fallen into the first year of us doing the podcast. So if you guys go and listen back to that one, I'm sure the energy, and at least from me, how I carry myself and how I talk within it is much different than what I feel like I represent now. The energy that I have, and also like the experience that I have now, the exemplification of going through and practicing these tools and techniques of the just philosophy over the last 8 years. Everything I've learned through having the conversations with Alexander within the podcast, and of course the conversations that him and I had in our personal time, just putting that all into practice into my life and learning from it and growing and building upon those different levels. Every time you work on something, you get the mental process, or you can conceptualize what you're supposed to do. Like, it makes sense to you logically. And then when you're challenged with that, you have to then follow through on the change that you conceptualized that you wanted to make. And once you can fully do that, that's kind of when you take that step into that next level of evolution, throughout your growth journey. And you kind of then create a new foundation for yourself. But again, you're going to be challenged again a few more times to then, it's like the universe or God testing you and saying, are you really firm in this belief? Are you really going to follow through with how you want to handle this intentionally going forward? And then every time we follow through and we exemplify what we're trying to, make a change within, how we want to respond, then we're just telling God, we're telling the universe, hey, no, I mean business. This is how I want to handle myself. And when we can follow through that way, that's when we take that step to the next level. So I want to pause there. I just did a little bit of an intro, and I want to thank you guys for listening, for sharing the podcast. But I do want to mention that if you haven't noticed, we have lowered our price for our back catalog, and to subscribe, become a member on our website. It is wisepodcast.com, and it is only $4.99. You get all of the back catalog in full. So that includes the 110 episodes that we did the first 4 or 5 years. And then we moved on to the Inward Journey story series, in which Alexander and I actually took the time to write these stories, and Alexander did a great job at the production value of it, where he added music and sound effects to these stories. And then we interacted with the stories and used them as an example, and then ran our commentary in responding to what each character could do to bring more consciousness into the situations that we were describing. So that was a 13 episode series. And then we went more into I would say more into like and I use this term lightly, a masterclass type of structure, where we got a little more serious, where we would have a free version of the episodes where we would touch upon the topic, and then in the complete conversation is what we called it, we would go into detail on how to actually follow through on the stuff we talked about in the free version. So we did that for about the last 40 episodes, and then now we're kind of just, kind of taking our own perspectives and doing separate episodes where we reflect back on some of these episodes to add, a little bit of more clarity and kind of update how we've interacted with that information, at least from my perspective. Alexander is adding a more rounded view where he feels like he could on each episode that we reflect on. And I'm just, discussing how I've been able to utilize it in my life and give examples and share stories and experiences. So I hope you guys are enjoying it. And we're now going and releasing episodes every week where we can. And we plan on doing more of the traditional episodes where it's him and and I think we're going to be doing one on resistance coming up because this seems like a huge topic. I don't think we've done one solely on resistance. We've talked about resistance in many of the episodes, but to do one on resistance, because resistance is one of the most important aspects of any self growth philosophy or way of life. So I think we just kind of want to check in and do one around that. So that should be coming up in the near future. But first, we wanted to roll back and go back to episode 19 and talk about unconditional love. So I'm going to be talking about, my kind of perspective around this, because at the beginning of doing this work, I had a different view of unconditional love. And of course, this episode helped me understand it. But I thought that I would be able to do and be able to live in unconditional love like maybe 2 or 3 years into doing this work. And I laugh at myself now because I know not what I know, or is that how I should be saying it? Um, the famous phrase, which is "Forgive them, Father, for they not know what they do," or whatever. And I did not know. I was very ignorant in how hard doing this work is, but how much time it takes to go through and unlearn the stuff that we've learned and unprogram ourselves from the influences, from the subconscious behaviors that we've learned to do over time by our environment when we're younger, by the stuff we watch on TV, by the people we surround ourselves with. We pick up on their energy, on the way they do things, and we do this subconsciously. So it's not like we technically intend to do these things, but that's why consciousness is so important. Consciousness is just the idea of becoming aware of what you're doing before or when you're doing it so that you can make a choice, so that we're not just automaton, you know, robots just going along with how we've been programmed through fear, through, our upbringing, through our belief systems. I mean, you could even throw religion into that, political spectrums, whatever we tend to believe in. All of these things tend to program us, and we almost become like little minions of these things. And that removes our control. It removes our freedom. It removes our autonomy as individual, authentic beings of light that we are. And in the grand scheme of things, it takes away from us reaching our authentic selves. And I feel like that's a big part of doing this work is, yes, you're going to grow. Yes, you want to bring consciousness in, but this is going to lead you to your authentic self. We may never reach that full potential in this lifetime, but we surely will remove all of the layers that have been taught to us and get down to who we actually are as individuals, and to a point where we won't have to apologize to anybody for who we are, because we are in exemplification on what feeds us and what we're, essentially here to do. And when people ask that question, or when somebody asks them, what do you want to do? Like as far as like working or a job, and people are like, I don't know what I want to do. I need to find what I want to do, why I'm here. And to me, yes, part of it is going externally and trying things to see what lights you up internally, because you need to have that experience to know. But also, the other part of it is to listen to your internal calling, which is something that I've learned to do the last few years. Because if you can't listen to how you respond to doing the things, then you're just going to do the things and then not get the feedback that you need to find out who your authentic self is. And in order to listen to yourself, you have to remove all the distractions, all the energetic um content that's coming into you, like the phones, like the people, like having the TV on all the time, these subtle energies. You have to be able to get down to be able to listen to yourself, because it is such a quiet, subtle reaction. Like you have to train yourself to hear yourself. That's it's very intricate. So anyway, I say all these things because unconditional love, to me, how I understand it at this moment in my life, and we briefly talked about it in this episode where I was asking Alexander and comparing it to things. Like I asked him, is unconditional love consciousness? Is it like that? Or is unconditional love enlightenment? And I understand enlightenment is different. He talked about how he doesn't like to use certain words because they are loaded. Different spiritual cultures and religions use the certain terms, so they can mean different things to different people, and people also build up associations to certain words. So you want to try to be and use words as clear as possible and unloaded ones in our current culture. But I would say unconditional love is living in the now. And it is really kind of what we're doing this work for. And I feel like you can't say that you live in unconditional love, but also not process your emotions. Like, I feel like unconditional love is the state that we're working towards, is the ultimate goal, is, to me, this is just my opinion. I would say how I understand and utilize the term or the phrase Christ consciousness. I would say unconditional love is Christ consciousness. Some people could argue, but that's just how I use that term, Christ consciousness. I would say it's the same thing as unconditional love and very similar to consciousness as a whole. I feel like those are very similar terms, and I would probably use them interchangeably. Depends on the way I was using them, as what term I would pull in and utilize. Because I would tend to use unconditional love as a term in how we relate to people, or how I relate to people. We talk about love as the only feeling and the rest are emotions. But we also talked about in this episode that there is an emotional love and an unconditional love. And the emotional love is what we see in relationships. It is like based on attachment, it's based on needing somebody in your life to complete you. And if they decided to leave, you would be broken because, and I don't want to over complex or oversimplify this, because of course, saying that if somebody just decided to leave you and you've been married for 20 years, and to say that, to be in unconditional love, you wouldn't have emotions. I would say that it's human nature to have emotions. So maybe we can't ever live in unconditional love for more than a period of time. But I would like to think that, and again, I don't know because I'm not in that situation. I've never been in that situation. But if I was with somebody for 10 years or whatever, and they came to me and said, "Hey, I think we're growing apart, and I feel like I need to have other experiences." So the conscious part of me would hope that I would handle it this way, as I'm going to describe. Of course, I'm going to have feelings or emotions. I'm going to have emotions based on this. I may feel rejected. It depends on where I am currently in my self growth around these sort of topics. So I may feel rejected. I may feel hurt. I may feel like I did something wrong. I may feel shame because maybe I thought I did something wrong or I didn't live up to expectations from that other person. So I'm going to have those feelings, but I'm going to process them all. I'm going to understand that this is a natural reaction, either from trauma that I've had in my life or just themes that have run in the background that I've taken on from shows. Like, there are TV shows when you see something like a repetitive theme over and over, you kind of have like an expectation of like, oh, in this situation, I'm supposed to feel this way because TV says this. Like everybody that I've ever seen on TV, when somebody breaks up with somebody, the other person feels hurt and is supposed to beg them to stay because that's all I've seen. And I'm just using this as an example because there may be some people who that's all they've seen. So they think that that's how they're supposed to react. So it may not even be a trauma. It may just be, oh, everybody I've ever seen in this situation feels this. So I may feel like that I'm supposed to feel this way. So that can come in too. But at the end of or through the process, I would feel all these emotions come up and I would be like, okay, well, I feel that, but that's not the ultimate truth here. And I would set that aside. I would feel the next, emotion come up. And through all that, I would still know because I've practiced enough where I can override my emotions. Like I can still bring in my ultimate truth of where I want to work towards. Like, what is my truth? Of course, we have the 5 pillars to fall back on in these situations. But I've practiced enough where I can still know my ultimate truth of who I am and how I want to treat people in all situations. Because that's me. That's who I am authentically. I'm we'll get into this in a second because I want to bring in freedom and I want to bring in respect too in this. But I know how I want to treat people in every situation. I want to treat them how I want to be treated. It's the age-old saying. Except I really believe and exemplify it. But it also I can break it down into freedom, into respect as well. But in this situation, I want to try to understand consciousness in this situation. So I would go back and I would tap into the 5 pillars. I would bring up everybody is your teacher. Everything happens for a reason, or everything is in divine order, whether I understand it or not. So I would understand that this person feels like this relationship is holding them back in growth. And of course, like we would have a conversation about all this so I could understand it. But at the very core of it, I am going to, whether I like it or not, I'm going to find that I understand this situation and I'm not going to hold this person back. If they feel like that they need to have a certain experience outside of what our construct of a relationship is, then I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to beg them to stay. I'm going to understand that they feel that in order to honor their authentic self or their journey, that they feel like this no longer serves them. And again, we would have a conversation. I would understand it, but that's the ultimate feeling, or yeah, I guess you could call it a feeling, or the ultimate truth that would come into me. And again, this has happened to me. So whether I like it or not, I'm going to still put this person's authentic self or whatever they feel like they need above my emotions. My emotions are just my emotions, and I understand why I'm having them. But there's also an understanding of the truth here, which is I want somebody to be and live their authentic self. I tell people around me all the time that that's what I'm here to assist in. If somebody, needs to do something that rubs me the wrong way, but they authentically feel like they need to do it, then that's my boundary. And I will excuse myself, like I've done with my friend who was a drinker. Alexander helped me to find the right words to present this to them. And it was taken awesomely. Like the way I described it and the way they heard it, I felt heard, and it wasn't a problem anymore. So to live in unconditional love, I feel like is something that isn't going to happen your entire life and isn't going to happen all the time. It's something that we can tap into when we're grounded and when we are conscious. So when our emotions come in, that's when we're not going to see things clearly. And that's why we need to take some time to process our emotions and to get regrounded so that we can step back into unconditional love. So I would say don't beat yourself up if you are trying to live in unconditional love, because this is a human experience. We are going to have emotions, and there's going to be times when we're not conscious. That's what we're here to do. We're here to understand the difference between being conscious, knowing when you're conscious, and knowing when you're not, and to simply not communicate important things when you are not conscious, because that's when you're going to be seeing things through that filter, through that emotion, through those lenses. So you're not going to be seeing things or feeling things clearly until you process them, you understand why you're having them. You go back and you bring in the awareness of, okay, this is tied to my trauma. This is why I feel that way. But then you find the respect. So we're bringing in the 3 R's: recognize, respect, redirect. And we're giving it time to communicate to us why we're feeling this way. But then we're bringing in the acceptance of, okay, I understand. But at the same time, this person, is their life, and I want them to live authentically, whatever that is. And if that means that I'm not a part of that, it doesn't mean that I did anything wrong. It just means that there's something that they feel like they need to do. And I don't want to be the one to hold them back from whatever their authentic self needs in that situation. So yes, it's going to be hard on me. We're always going to have emotions, but I want to honor that person for especially for even communicating it to me in that way, consciously, in my hypothetical example. But the emotional love would see things through their emotions. So I would feel hurt and I would yell at them, and through my hurt, I'm expressing that through the words I'm saying, and I'm probably saying things that aren't true, calling them out. And maybe my past abandonment is coming up, and accusing them of leaving me and hurting me in that way, when it's really just my inner child that's hurt. It's a child that's taking a temper tantrum, or I'm disappointed, or maybe I had expectations. And it's hard not to have expectations when you're in a long-term relationship or you're in a marriage, because you do make those vows when you get married. I know that's a touchy subject, because marriage is interesting, because you're vowing to stay together no matter what. But in some aspects that might prevent growth, because if somebody, feels like they need to have an experience. And I'm not saying that's not just like anybody could just say, hey, I need to have this experience and I'm going to go do this to get out of a marriage. So I understand if somebody is confused by that, but at the same time, that's their decision. And what am I going to gain if I try to prevent them from doing that or making that decision? If somebody has made the decision, they've thought about how, what they need to do in that situation, and they need to leave the relationship, what good is it to fight that? What good is it? Like, the best thing, in my opinion, is to learn what happened, to learn whether there's something that I could learn from this situation. And of course, again, this is after processing my emotions and then bringing in consciousness. And so I wanted to bring in freedom, because I feel like consciousness and unconditional love has a lot to do with freedom. What I've learned is the freedom for people, for allowing people to be themselves, for not trying to control them and project my own insecurities onto these people. And so in this situation, if that person felt like they had to leave, the freedom is to allow them to leave. Don't make them feel guilty. Of course, again, that inner child is going to want to express the hurt that you may be feeling. But the best thing to do is to go and process that so that you don't, expel that anger or that frustration or that sadness onto that person. I'm not saying like don't feel sad with them, because I'm sure that person is going to feel sad as well, that they feel like they have to end it for whatever reason. And you may not have done anything wrong. It may just be time, divine timing. All relationships, I think Alexander has said this before, all relationships have an expiration date, whether that's during life or after life. Because when somebody passes, that's the end of that relationship in this realm. So that's where we're talking about this. So to me, unconditional love has a lot to do with freedom and allowing that person to be who they are and grow into their authentic self. Again, you're helping to foster and create an environment for that person to foster their authentic self. That is unconditional love to me. But also respecting this person and their journey. And again, that's where I would bring that in. If this person said, hey, I feel like I need to leave this situation and move on to something else for my authentic growth. I'm feeling like that calling. Like this could be a situation where two people, when they met, they both didn't want kids. But as they get older, maybe that woman, got into her later 30s, all of a sudden that biological clock started coming in. Like people change. Not the only thing we can count on in this life is change. And so if you got married at 28, let's say, and you vowed to stay together forever, but your value system at that point was you weren't going to have kids. You were on the same page. But then you're like 36, 38 now, and she's having a calling to have children, but the dude is still, no, I don't want to have children. I don't want to have that experience. I've processed that. I don't have resistance. I've just accepted that that's not in my lifetime. Then, what are they to do? So there's like two choices there. She can ignore that calling inside and push that down, or maybe talk about it, maybe try to find some acceptance around it. I'm sure she could have some, do some work and find out exactly why she feels like she needs to have children. And again, there may not be something there to tap into. It may just be, a physical hormonal thing. And it comes into, preference or how much work she wants to put in it. I don't know that situation on whether somebody could like mentally overcome that and have that acceptance and be able to, whenever those urges come in, to redirect it and be like, no, this is the life that I want. This is the person I want to live with. They don't want to have children. I made that commitment. I've resigned it. Like you have to do a lot of work in that situation to accept that and understand that, hey, this is just a biological urge. And I understand that, versus somebody who, is going to listen to that urge and maybe take it as a sign from the divine that, hey, I'm feeling that calling that I need to have children. Like, I'm not judging either way. Either way, I don't know like whether there's a right and wrong in that situation, but these are just two like conscious options in that situation. But the importance here is to bring in consciousness no matter what the decision is. So in the first one, you're bringing in consciousness. You're understanding that, no, this is the relationship that I want to be in. I made this decision, and I understand that this is just a biological urge, and I'm going to redirect it and just bringing in understanding every time it comes up that this is just biological. It's common. It's going to happen. But this is the life that I made. I love my life, and I understand that biologically, physically, my body wants to have children because that's how I'm created. But this is the life that I want. So, and not having children allows me to have this life with this person. And I love that. So again, you're bringing in consciousness in there. But again, the other side is that, nope, maybe I see this as the divine telling me that I need to have children. You talk about it openly with your partner, with the dude, and he, still has that boundary. And at some point, it's okay that both people have boundaries. And so this person is still, the dude is still, no, we talked about it. I don't want to have children. And, I feel like that's really where I still am. And then she has a decision to say, no, I feel like I need to explore this. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave this relationship to go explore it. I feel a calling to do this. And that's okay in that situation. Like, you can understand both sides. Nobody's doing anything wrong here. Both are honoring their authentic selves in that situation. But I mean, I guess the question here would be, what is authentic to her? Is it that relationship or is it having children? And I guess like her decision is going to go in one way or another. As long as she's bringing in consciousness here, I think that's what counts. And then sometimes we make decisions and they're wrong. But the most important thing here is to make a decision based on how you feel internally, how it's affecting you. And this brings me back to the willpower versus trust argument, where I wanted to just know which decision is right. And in this is a perfect situation for that. But I think based on the willpower and trust situation, it is how it's affecting you. So if she, tried to process it and bring it back to, hey, this is just a physical thing, and trying to redirect that feeling. And if that still didn't work for her, then I feel like, okay, then maybe she does need to go to that route where maybe it is a calling, and maybe it is part of her life path that she's supposed to do this, and this is happening for a reason, and happening because she does need to leave this relationship, or say again one more time that, hey, this is my situation. I'm really feeling called to have a child, and so I'm going to have to leave this relationship, and I want to honor you. I want to give you the freedom. I want you to be authentically you. So again, if that's not having children, then let's just have that conversation one more time. So both people are doing what is best for them. And that to me is unconditional love. If both people can be in that situation, love that person through that situation, and at the end, if they need to go their separate ways, but they honor and respect and give that freedom to that person to be authentically them, that is unconditional love to me. So again, they may not be together. They may break up and get a divorce if they were married in that situation, but they are unconditionally loving that person, because the dude didn't be like, hey, you made a commitment. You said this when we got married. We were on the same page. Like, that is going to come up for him. But it's how long does it take for him to understand that, hey, yes, those things were said, but people change and things change. And just understanding that, because we've all changed. We've all changed our minds. We all make plans with our friends, and then when the date comes around, we just don't feel like doing it. Alexander has talked about, in that situation, when you're around your friends and you're like, oh, let's do this again, this was great, you're in a higher emotion where you're not seeing things clearly, you're not grounded, and then you make plans. And then when you're grounded, or when you're in the situation that's up to, like the day before, you've changed from the day or a day that you've made that commitment to the day before, where things have changed. You may not have gotten enough rest. You may not be energetically, grounded and ready and available to be in public or be in a social situation. So we've all been there. And so to me, the respect part is understanding, and if you can respect yourself in those situations to set that boundary or to make that call and say, hey, I'm not feeling it tonight. I need to take care of myself. I know I said I would be there, but let's talk again and reschedule, because, I'm just not there today. So in that moment, you're respecting yourself instead of going. I mean, even if you go and you force yourself to go, you may have a good time, but it's listening to yourself and just understanding that we all do this. And so extending that same respect to that other person in that situation, that hey, people change and people need different experiences, and you don't want somebody telling you and forcing you to have or not have a certain experience that you may not want. So it's understanding that within ourselves, that that's what we want from other people, and then going against what we want and our inner child taking fits to bring in that consciousness, that freedom, that respect over all of that in that moment when it's challenging. That to me is unconditional love. But the challenge is that when they disappoint you, how do you react to that? Because if you truly are in unconditional love, you're going to look at yourself first and like, did I have an expectation? Where can I utilize what they're doing? Where is it affecting me in mind? Am I projecting my own emotions around this situation? Because again, if you're in unconditional love, anything they do, you will find the respect to respect them, even if it's like making a decision to not go to your party over somebody else's. You're going to find that respect for them to make their own decisions, to live authentically them in that situation. Again, you may still have emotions come in, but it's the processing that first before just calling them up and be like, hey, why aren't you going to my party? And then just projecting all of your hurt onto them, because they made a decision. So it's one thing to just ask, hey, why aren't you going to my party? And then they may have a reason. It's just hearing them out, respecting them as a conscious individual, even if they're not conscious, just as an individual, the freedom to be them. When you give people that freedom and that respect, they are going to respond to you differently. You're going to have a different relationship. They're going to respect you in return. So, I mean, I can't love unconditional love any more than I do. It's really been a practice that I try to do. Okay, I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect in it, but it's really something that I, keep myself a check in. Like, am I authentically loving this person? And to me, I know what that means, because I've kind of programmed myself into knowing how I relate to the term unconditional love. And so, just to me, everybody knows what's best for them. And it's so easy for us to think that we know what's best for them, but they're going to make decisions and take actions to where they are in their growth. So when we say we know what's best for somebody, we may be like more experienced in that situation. And we may be able to say, hey, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And it may be a negative thing, quote negative, and they may not want that to happen. But if they don't have the experience in that situation, or even the desire or the consciousness to listen to somebody else and take that wisdom, they may need to have that experience to learn that lesson. And just because we've been in that experience and we've gone through that, had that experience, and then made it to the other side to gain that wisdom, doesn't mean that person doesn't also need it. It's one thing to give that wisdom, mostly if they ask for it. As Alexander says, good intentions are the death of a wise one. Sometimes when we just say our wisdom and give our opinion, it may not always be wanted. But that person may need to have that experience to then learn that lesson, to then make a different decision going forward to grow in the direction that maybe you are. So we all need catalysts for our growth. And some people need harsher ones. I mean, that's really what it is. Like Alexander has told me time and time again, like how to do certain things. And obviously, like I've asked these things or just learned it through the podcast. He hasn't just, he's respected me enough as an individual to not just say all the things that he sees, because I am a type of person that I do need to have certain experiences to learn it myself, to learn all the intricacies of it. And yes, I could have just asked him and listened to him. But my type of person who I am, some situations I do need to learn myself. I do need more of a well-rounded view. So unfortunately, Alexander had to watch me go through all these things that he had the wisdom on already through his experiences. And you can only understand, what that looked like from his perspective, to give me the freedom and the respect as an individual to in a loving way, to watch me make those mistakes, because he knew that I had to make them to learn. We all need catalysts, in some situations. This podcast, or asking Alexander a question based on something I was curious on, or how to handle a situation, sometimes his wisdom was a catalyst for me to make a change. But sometimes that's not what I needed. So everybody's different. Everybody has had different experiences. Everybody's made energetically different. We all need different things in different situations. Some people need to touch the hot stove to learn what hot feels like. And we may be a person who's already touched the hot stove and burned all of our skin off, and maybe showing them a picture, you would think that, hey, this is what's going to happen to you. Some people need to feel that. And our unconditional love part of that is to bless you, brother. Have at it. I support you. I want you to be authentically you. And I want you to learn everything in that situation that you need to going forward. So it is a little bit of tough love as well. Just allowing somebody and watching them. Sometimes you got to watch them make mistakes and crumble, and even sometimes over and over and over again. But sometimes correcting them is not what they need in that situation. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So anyway, I hope and I wish that you guys can bring consciousness in all of your life experiences. And maybe this has helped. Hopefully it has helped you guys maybe round out your view of unconditional love a little bit more based on, how I understand it. Again, this may not be to the T that how Alexander would explain it. And of course, he's going to do his version of reflection on this podcast. So I'm very interested in hearing what he has to say about this topic, and how we differentiate, because I'm going to learn from that as well. So I really appreciate you guys. If you appreciate us and you appreciate the time and the wisdom and us sharing all of this so that you can bring more consciousness, learn to bring more consciousness into your life, or other perspectives, please consider joining our subscription. We call it the Wise Complete Conversation. And you can go to wisewisepodcast.com. It's only $4.99 a month. You get all of our back catalog, 150 plus episodes. And that is probably, it's definitely over at least 200 hours of content. So we also make free 2 episodes a month in full. So you do have those, and I will be communicating what those are every month through social media. I'm trying my best here. Social media is a challenge for me, but I'm trying my best. But other ways you can support us, you can share the podcast, word of mouth, just share a perspective and say, hey, this is where I got it from. Check these guys out. That is immensely helpful. But also, sharing our stuff on social media, going to our YouTube channel where you can watch this video. If you're on the audio podcast, we do videos on our YouTube channel. So if you can subscribe and like our videos on that and leave comments, that helps the algorithm as well. Interact with us. We love it. You can go to our website, wisewisepodcast.com. We have a contact form there. If you have any topic considerations for us, any questions, and we do have a Facebook group as well. And Alexander also does self-growth consulting and relationship consulting. He also does energetic design readings as well. So he has a plethora of different options on his website. If you go to thejustphilosophy.com, you can see all of his offerings there, including some audio meditations and stuff like that, but also the revolutionary VibroTune sound table that he invented. So anyway, with that said, I wholeheartedly appreciate you guys tuning in. And I hope that we can continue this discussion on another platform, or, through a contact form submission, or even in person. If you guys live in the North Carolina or roundabout area, Alexander does do his sound journey through the chakras. And with it getting nicer out, being spring/summer of 2024 when this is being recorded, he is starting to have them outside under the stars. So it's a great event if you've never experienced it. And I hope to see you at one of those at an upcoming date. So thank you guys so much. Much respect and love, unconditional love to you all. Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise whys.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.